I don't know which one it was, South Carolina or whatever it was,
Great
the
point,
school,
by
the
the
degree,
way.
all this stuff. Okay.
Yeah, because I went to went over to South Carolina University, and I took them over the at the time I had a company where we were growing diamonds through not high pressure, high temperature, but through chemical vapor deposition.
Okay, first of all, he just let that slide right on past. I would have been like, wait, you did what? Excuse me?
Went over to South Carolina University, and I took them over the at the time I had a company where we were growing diamonds through not high pressure, high temperature, but through chemical vapor deposition.
Chemical vapor deposition. So here, hold on. Okay, so I needed to do that because otherwise this other stuff doesn't make sense. Okay, so 1 times 1 is 2. All right, here we go.
Leads to you going back with Rogan with Eric Weinstein, the 4-hour one that you guys did, right? And even I think Neil deGrasse Tyson did a video reacting to all the stuff that you had. Brian Keating did as well. I asked Brian Keating about the one document that you sent to me. I forwarded it to him, and he read a look through it. And and I'll preface what he said. He's really trying to figure things out, going and he made a video talking about one area that he was wrong. I don't know if you've seen that video or not, but he seemed very much willing to sit down and have the conversation. But it almost seems like when even watching Weinstein, Eric, with you, it's like, look, we love what you're doing, and
But stop.
And bro, tell me this isn't a microcosm of what we fucking deal with all of the time. I hate to say it like that, but if this ain't a microcosm of what we deal with all of the time, like we're not allowed to be brilliant. We're not allowed to be smart. We're not allowed to come up with stuff on our own. We're just not allowed. It's crazy how it's. Anyway, let's continue.
Stop doing it.
Yeah, but stop doing it because peer review. You're not one of our peers. You're not qualified enough to get a peer review, but we'll give you an opinion on this, right? That was kind of like the establishment side towards you. What was your biggest takeaway after you?
So you're not qualified. You're not a peer. We'll look at it, but since you're not a peer, we can't peer review your work. So we'll look at it and we'll give you an opinion, but it won't get a peer review. Meaning, like, if you really go try to raise real money in the traditional sense and go to a college in the traditional sense and do all the things in the traditional sense, you need a peer review. They gatekeep that stuff. So he's been frozen out of that. Let's continue.
Your 4 hours with Eric and Joe, and what's happened ever since?
Well, I gave Eric a great deal of grace. He was a little rude and cut me off a lot of times, but that's the nature of being in a position of authority. I hoped that he would evaluate the geometry I gave him. I showed him. I went to his house 2 days later, and we had dinner, and I took buckets of proof of geometry of all the linchpins and their configurations, all the wave conjugations and their configurations. The wave conjugation, so you understand, is the electric part of the world. Is how plasma is the contractive part. All shapes are the expansive stuff that describes radiation's work. The linchpin is the constitution between the two. It's the friend. It's the translator between the big and the little. And I took all these things to his house. I thought he would evaluate them. I thought he would send them throughout his friends. And then I watched him go on Piers Morgan and literally say that 99% of everything I said was bathwater, was bullshit. The Howard comma.
He said that afterwards?
Yeah,
or
he said
you guys
this,
getting on together?
He did this after our talk on Joe Rogan, but before our meeting when I went to his house. So I let that go, him saying that 99% of everything I was doing was bathwater. And then he said, the one thing that might be good is this linchpin. But he got there by a mistake, which I clearly showed that it wasn't a mistake, the 109.4.
He got there by mistake. So even if you get there by mistake. Let's continue.
Or 7. But he said that everything I did was just by accident and nothing had value. So we were able to take the Howard comma, which is the resonance created from the linchpin. We were able to take the tetrahedron wave conjugations, which is the shape of the fractal in itself. Mm-hmm. And we were able to take the mirrored all shapes and literally rebuild the entire world the way that, according to, well, not rebuild the world. We've been able to take those same things that he called bathwater and apply them to the 3-body problem and solve a 300-year-old problem that Newton couldn't solve, that Poincare couldn't solve, because they needed a finite space. They needed curved multiplication. They also needed to reimagine how the prime numbers behave. They needed to understand that gravity was just an effect of electricity. But how could we take the things he said was bathwater?
Listen, bro, there is so much. Gravity is just a and it makes perfect sense when you say it out loud, but you don't, but when you talk about it, we're talking about mediums. Water is a medium. Air is a medium. Stuff moves through, right? Even in space, even though it's not oxygen, there's something there because there is a medium that you need to get, you can get through. Now, it might not be thick, but it's a medium nonetheless. What they'll basically say is gravity is essentially like, you know, the wake off the back of your car when you're driving, or the wake of the plane when the plane goes by, the wake that goes off of it, like the air that comes off, the turbulent air that comes off. Gravity is essentially the turbulence off of your mass. Like it's like even though you're sitting still, you're still moving. The mass moving around has its own wake. And what he's basically alluding to is that gravity, since everything puts off an electrical field and everything is constantly moving, what gravity is actually the wake of your electrical field. Well, they're not calculating for that in anything.
Right.
So all of your math is wrong. So you'll never feel, bro, listen to this. This is crazy. People don't really understand what is being said right here. Like all of your science books are bullshit, guys.
And solve the biggest problems in math and in physics. When he said it had no physical application, no chemistry application, no application towards mathematics. But we solved all the biggest problems with it. And that's why I gave it to you ahead of time and asked you to run it through your AI.
Yeah, and we did that. I guess the most basic one. Okay, so if I go to someone like you who's an outsider coming in the scientist world, right?
And now, PBD kind of sounds very condescending when he says this right here. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive. I think the way he asked this question is disrespectful and intentionally done to aggravate, but I could be wrong.
Mathematics world, and you make certain claims. First question the academia is going to ask is, what is your qualification? What is your education? Where did you go to? And it seems like some of these guys came out and said, well, that school this, the school.
Broken Blade. If you come up with the theory of relativity and it can be proven and it's right and that your math is correct and it is sound, does it matter whether or not you went to college or not?
Although Charles Darwin was not a scientist, they don't seem to care about that.
School that I don't know which one it was, South Carolina or whatever it was,
Great
the
point,
school,
by
the
the
degree, all this stuff. Okay.
Yeah, because I went over to South Carolina University, and I took them over at the time I had a company where we were growing diamonds through not high pressure, high temperature, but through chemical vapor deposition.
Okay, first of all, he just let that slide right on past. I would have been like, wait, you did what? Excuse me?
Went over to South Carolina University, and I took them over at the time I had a company where we were growing diamonds through not high pressure, high temperature, but through chemical vapor deposition.
Chemical vapor deposition, not through pressure and heat. So we're growing diamonds, not through pressure and heat.
Like no, explain that.
He just rolled right past it, bro.
For his layman,
the conversation.
What is the process?
Yeah, I would have been like, wait a second, hold on. In the interview, I'd been like, whoa. Wait, you said you were growing diamonds? How? Oh, we're going to absolutely circle back to that.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, like, let's finish this part, but we're going to circle back to that. It's like he didn't even hear it.
Was having with them, and they were talking about giving me an honorary degree, which should have been in chemistry, because that's the stuff that we were doing. We were transmuting one thing into another thing. So when I went on that other show and I had
transmuting one thing into another thing,
my honorary degree that was given to me, I had no idea it was in humanities. I thought it was going to be in the thing that I went to talk to them about. So
to them, to say you don't have a PhD from South Carolina, it's an honorary, right? So it's not like, okay. So to the folks who went to school to see all these different theories, what do they tell you when they explain it to you? What do they say because right now I just went online and I typed in which scientists agree with Terrence Howard, okay? And mainstream scientific response, Howard's views are widely rejected by academic and scientific communities. His interpretation of math and physics are generally considered mathematically incorrect, scientifically unfounded, right? Independent and fringe thinkers, they gave some folks that are from on the YouTube side that do. Why the rejection? Claims 1 × 1 = 2. And that's the most basic one, right? Where it starts from there. And it goes to some of the other theories.
He has 94 or 96 patents. Terrence Howard does.
That you guys have spoken about. Help me understand how, in your mind, to the average person who hasn't put amount of time that you have put in, credibility after 1 times 1 times 1 equals 2. How do you come up with that conclusion?
Well, if I was wrong, then they wouldn't have made such a big stink about it. But the fact that I was able to show them with their calculator that because they have 1 times 1 equaling 1,
right?
An action times an action without a reaction.
An action times an action without the reaction, right? How can you do an action on something and it still be the same? Right? Like when you multiply something times something, you get something.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? If you add something to something, you get something. So if 1 plus 1 is 2, then what is 1 times 1? I mean, fundamentally, it doesn't make sense. Like, what? It's crazy why. Now, if you say, okay, if I'm just talking about money, or if I'm just staying like here, fiat, cash, that makes sense. But if you're in the real world, the physical world, 1 times 1 equals 1 doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. I mean, I know how everyone's like triggered to say that it is, but again, his whole issue was 1 times, meaning like you're doing something to that 1, multiplying. So by design, it can't be 1. By definition, it can't be 1. If you multiply anything times 1, it's going to be something else. 1 times 0.0 or 0.01 gives you a number. 1 times 0.0001 gives you a number. 1 times 1.1 gives you a number. Why wouldn't 1.1 times 1? Why wouldn't that give you a different number too? It would, but it just gives you 1. So it's fundamentally flawed. It always has been. But, they were like, well, because I said so, is how they answered it beforehand.
And as a result of it, you get this contradiction with the square root of 2 being cubed, having the same value as the square root of 2 times 2, which should say a red flag, a herring right away that there's something wrong with the mathematics, with that being the problem that leads into the distribution of prime numbers, because the number 2, any prime number that you subtract from another prime number always is going to end up in a composite number. But except with the case of the number 2. That's the only prime number that you subtract from another prime number and you end up in a prime number. Why? Because the number 2 is a composite number. But they've changed that by trying to force that into a prime because they wanted 1 times 1 to equal 1. And the square root of 2 being 1.414, they say that times itself will equal. So it's all convoluted. None of their stuff makes sense. If I was a student, a mathematical student or a calculus student or algebraic student, and I come in and I show a proof where, okay, 1 times 1.
That's incorrect. I know we want to say that it's correct. I know we want to. And I know it makes sense why 1 times 1 would be 1. I understand why we would say that. However, if you're just on the definition of the words and the fundamentals, if you take 1 and you add something to it, it's more than 1, right? Anything.
Yeah.
If you add to 1, anything, 0.1, 0.25, anything, it'll be 1.2, 1.5, right? You're adding. So if adding 1 plus 1 is 2, then if I'm multiplying, not just adding, I'm multiplying 1 times 1, you're telling me that when I multiply times 1, it's less than when I add 1? What sense does that make?
It's the same, because it's like 1 times 0, like any number times 0
is 0.
Like,
Exactly. The math doesn't work. They just said because I said so. That's exactly it. broken blade. Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, this is like Chef Mike was like, okay, one water bottle 0 amount of times. Okay, 0 amount of times. That's nothing. That's 0.
Nothing. It's 0. So 1 times 1 equals 1 in a fictitious imaginary world. But in the real world, where there's like hard stuff, one thing plus another thing is another thing. 1 times that same thing should, by definition, be more than just adding it. Should be. Anyways, the reason why he brought that up is he was basically pointing out that there's a fundamental miscalculation. There's a mistake with the math. And if the mistake at the math is happening at this level, then all the way up at the top of the top of the top, chances are you're going to be wrong there too. That was his point. His point was like, you guys are over here trying to preach to me about what this is and what this ain't and what this is. And I'm a fool you with the simple one. I'm going to show you how dumb you are because your own stupid math doesn't even math right. Your own stupid math has got a whole bunch of stuff in there because I said so. Dark matter. You know what I'm saying? Uh-oh, are we going to fight? Are we going to fight? Oh, Mike. Did you not listen to the whole conversation? He must not listen to the whole conversation. Let's let this dude rock real quick. We'll come back.
1 equals 1. And the proof of this is the square root of 2 having a contradiction with being cubed and multiplied by 2. That's a loop.
Okay, so then
that's a problem.
So then what's 1.1 times 1.1?
Okay, now, this is where PBD shows how much of an idiot he is. Because instead of using whole numbers that is just really easy to understand, he's putting all the decimals in there. And I think he's intentionally doing it to muddy the waters. Because he basically was like, hey, 2 times 2 is 4. Square root of 2 is 4. So if that's the math, then the 1 times 1 equals 1 is incorrect. That's what he was saying. Like, if this is the rule over here, and I apply the exact same rule to just a different set of numbers right here, you give me a different answer. That's the problem. And so if all of your math is based off this flawed part right here, everything behind it is screwed up. That's like basically you having building a house and one side is 6 inches higher than the other. So by the time you get to the roof, it's off by 2 feet.